My father-in-law demanded I pay for his retirement cruise while calling me a gold digger. Then he saw the prenup. My name is Faith Sterling and I am 52 years old. The mahogany table was covered in fine china and the smell of roasted lamb, but the air felt like ice. My father-in-law, Silas, reached into his blazer and slammed a glossy brochure onto the table. It was for a $50,000 luxury retirement cruise around the world. He didn't ask. He looked at me with a cold, greedy stare. "You're paying for this, Faith," he barked. I felt my face get hot as I looked at the price tag. When I hesitated, he let out a cruel sneer that made the whole family go quiet. "Don't act stingy. We all know you only married my son for his family's wealth. Pay up, you gold digger." I looked at my husband, Leo, waiting for him to defend me. He just stared at his plate, moving a potato around as if he hadn't heard his father insult me. If you want to see how I dug their graves, hit subscribe for more revenge stories. The silence in the room was deafening. Silas leaned forward, his face red with a fake kind of anger. He started telling everyone at the table that I came from nothing. He said I should be grateful just to have his last name on my driver's license. "This cruise is your entry fee, Faith," he said, tapping the brochure with a heavy gold ring. "It's a small price to pay for staying in a family like ours." He made it sound like I was a servant who had finally been given a bill. My heart was pounding, but I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just put my linen napkin down and took a slow sip of water. I looked Silas right in his eyes. I felt a cold strength rising up in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. "I'll give you exactly what you've earned, Silas," I said calmly. He smiled, thinking he had won. That night, the house felt like a stranger's home. In our bedroom, Leo didn't apologize for his father's behavior. Instead, he tried to be romantic. He lit candles and spoke in that soft, sweet voice he used when he wanted something. He told me that his dad was just old school and that I should help out to keep the peace. He made it sound like $50,000 was just spare change. As he tried to pull me close, I saw through his act. His eyes weren't full of love, they were full of worry. He was desperate for that money. I realized then that Leo had been the one telling Silas that my pockets were deep. He had painted me as a target so he wouldn't have to deal with his father's demands himself. The man I loved was handing me over to a wolf just to save his own skin. I stayed awake long after Leo fell asleep, thinking about our wedding day. 3 years ago, I thought I was entering a fairy tale. But while the guests were dancing, Silas had pulled me into a side room. He didn't offer a toast. He told me he would make my life a living hell if I ever tried to take a dime of his son's money. He looked at me with such hatred that I almost ran away right then. He handed me a thick stack of papers and told me it was a family protection document. He said I had to sign it if I wanted to join the family. He thought he was trapping a poor woman who wanted his fortune. He didn't know that I had my own lawyer look at those papers. He thought he was protecting his wealth, but he didn't realize who actually held the keys to the castle. The next morning, the screaming started early. Silas called my cell phone, his voice so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. He had tried to use a secondary credit card to put a deposit on his cruise, but it was declined. He was furious, accusing me of hacking into Leo's accounts to block him. "How dare you touch our family money?" he yelled. I sat in my home office, looking at the bright morning sun. "I didn't hack anything, Silas," I said, my voice as steady as a rock. "I just stopped the subsidies." I had finally cut off the automatic transfers that had been keeping his lifestyle afloat for years. He went quiet for a second, then let out a sound of pure rage. He didn't know that the family money he loved so much was actually coming from my tech startup profits. Silas did not take the news well. By that afternoon, my phone was blowing up with alerts. He had started a nasty smear campaign on Facebook. He posted photos of me at family dinners with captions calling me a vulture in the nest and a shameless gold digger. He told everyone that I was trying to bankrupt a poor, retired old man. Even some of my own friends started sending me confused texts, asking if everything was okay. They couldn't believe the things he was saying about my character. I felt a sting of hurt, but I didn't reply to any of the posts. I was sitting in a quiet coffee shop when I received a message from a number I didn't recognize. "I know where Silas's real retirement money went," the text said. My heart skipped a beat as I looked at the screen. I knew this was the thread I needed to pull to unravel his entire life. I met the mystery person in a crowded park where no one would notice us. It was Silas's former secretary, a woman named Martha who had worked for him for 20 years. She looked nervous, clutching her purse like it held a bomb. She told me a story that made my jaw drop. Silas hadn't been a millionaire in a very long time. His business had actually collapsed back in 2018 due to his own bad decisions. Since then, he had been living a complete lie. He was broke, and he had been surviving entirely on the salary Leo earned at my company. But it was worse than that. Silas had convinced Leo that the money was family interest from an old trust fund. Silas had been a ghost living in a mansion built of my hard work and Leo's ignorance. To see how I exposed his fake empire, hit subscribe for more revenge stories. Leo knew something was wrong, so he tried a different tactic. He told me he had booked a surprise trip to a secluded cabin in the woods so we could reconnect. The cabin was beautiful, but the air inside was heavy with the ghosts of our old love and the weight of his new lies. He built a fire and opened a bottle of wine, trying to use all his old charm to get me to relax. He started talking about the cruise again, saying it would be a great investment in family peace. I watched him, feeling a deep sadness for the man I thought I knew. While he was out gathering more wood for the fire, I took a chance and looked through his leather travel bag. My breath caught in my throat. I found a set of papers for a loan agreement for $500,000. At the bottom, I saw my own signature. I stared at the paper in the dim light of the cabin. It wasn't my signature. It was a perfect forgery. I realized then that the betrayal went much deeper than a cruise. Leo and Silas were working together to drain my company dry. They weren't just asking for a vacation, they were trying to steal $500,000 to save Silas from a secret gambling debt that was about to catch up with him. The retirement cruise Silas kept screaming about wasn't a vacation at all. It was his exit strategy. He was planning to use that $50,000 to flee the country before the people he owed money to found him. Leo was helping him do it, even if it meant destroying my business and my life. I put the papers back exactly as I found them. My husband was no longer my partner. He was my greatest enemy. I didn't say a word when Leo came back inside with the wood. I played the part of the submissive wife perfectly. I even squeezed his hand and told him I would think about the cruise. For the next week, I was the perfect daughter-in-law. I smiled at Silas and promised him that I would have the check for the cruise ready by Friday afternoon. Silas was so happy that he couldn't help himself. He was so sure he had one that he decided to throw a small party. He invited all his old rich friends over to his house just to brag about his obedient and wealthy daughter-in-law. He walked around the room with a glass of scotch, acting like a king again. He had no idea that while he was busy bragging, I was meeting with the best forensic accountants and lawyers in the city. I sat in a glass-walled office downtown, far away from Silas and his fake smiles. My lawyers were going through a thick file on their desk. This was the actual prenup that I had made Leo sign before we said our vows. Silas had never even looked at it. He was too arrogant to think a gold digger would have her own legal protection. My lawyer pointed to a specific paragraph at the bottom of page 12. The moral turpitude clause, he whispered with a grin. The prenup didn't protect Leo's family money because there wasn't any left to protect. Instead, it protected every single asset I brought into the marriage. It stated that if Leo ever tried to commit fraud or forgery against me, he would lose every right to our home, our cars, and my company. He would walk away with nothing but the clothes on his back. Silas had built a trap, but I was the one holding the key. A few days later, I decided to accidentally crash Silas's weekly poker night. I walked into his smoky den and saw him sitting with 4 other men. The table was covered in high-stakes chips and expensive cigars. Silas looked annoyed when he saw me, but then he started to show off. He told his friends that his rich daughter-in-law was covering his tab for the night. I watched him lose $10,000 in less than an hour, acting like it was play money. One of the gamblers, a man with sharp eyes, looked at me and asked, "Your husband says you are worth $100 million. Is that true, Faith?" I just smiled and didn't say a word. I saw the greed in Silas's eyes as he looked at me. He was selling my future to his friends just to feel like a big man for one more night. The air in our bedroom felt thick and heavy on the night Leo finally pushed the papers toward me. He told me it was a loan for a new house we had discussed months ago. He used every bit of his charm, kissing my neck and telling me how much he loved our life together. He was trying to distract me so I wouldn't read the fine print of the $500,000 document. My heart was breaking, but my hand was steady. I picked up the pen and looked at him. He was smiling, but his eyes were twitching with nerves. I leaned down and signed the paper with a flourish. But I didn't sign my name. I used the name of a character from an old book, Lydia Bennet. Leo didn't even look at the signature. He just grabbed the paper and tucked it away, thinking his father's debts were finally paid. Hit subscribe to see his face when he tries to cash it. The next morning, I found out that Silas was getting desperate for quick cash. He had gone into my jewelry box and taken my grandmother's heirloom watch. It was a beautiful piece made of gold and tiny diamonds. I found a listing for it on a private auction site under a fake name. Silas was trying to sell my family history just to get enough money for a first-class flight out of the country. I didn't call the police. Instead, I used a secret account to buy the watch back anonymously. I had the auction house send a receipt directly to Silas's front door in a bright red envelope. I pasted a gold digger sticker on the front of the receipt. I wanted him to know that I was watching his every move. He was trying to rob me, but I was the one who was truly in control of his fate. Silas decided to pull one last stunt at a big charity gala for the hospital. He stood up on the stage in front of hundreds of people and started a speech about family values. He called me up to the stage, pretending he wanted to honor me for my generosity. He was trying to force me into handing over the $50,000 cruise check in front of all his friends so I couldn't back out. The lights were bright, and the crowd was clapping. Silas held out his hand, expecting a check. I walked up to the microphone, smiling at the cameras. "I have a very special gift for Silas tonight," I said, my voice echoing through the ballroom. "Instead of a vacation, I have provided a full, independent audit of his 2025 taxes for the board of directors." The room went silent. Silas's face turned from red to a sickly, pale white. While Silas was frozen on that stage, I didn't stay to watch him crumble. I had slipped away earlier that evening to his house. I used the spare key I wasn't supposed to have and walked straight into his private home office. I spent an hour going through his heavy oak desk and his locked filing cabinets. I finally found what I was looking for. It was a thick blue folder labeled Gold Digger. Inside wasn't a list of expenses, but a systematic list of every woman Silas had conned over the last 20 years. It contained their bank details, their social security numbers, and how much he had managed to drain from them. My own name was at the very bottom of the list. He had a payday date written next to it for the following week. He didn't just want a cruise, he wanted my entire life's work. My hands shook as I realized I was just a number to him. When I got back to our house, Leo was waiting for me. He wasn't the sweet husband anymore. He had dropped the nice guy act completely. He knew I had embarrassed his father at the gala, and he was terrified. "Either you pay his debt right now, or I'm filing for divorce," he shouted. He stepped into my space, trying to look intimidating. "I'll take half of your company, Faith. I'll make sure you walk away with nothing." I looked at him and felt a strange sense of peace. The man I had loved was gone, replaced by a greedy stranger. I couldn't help it, I started to laugh. It was a cold, clear sound that filled the room. "Half of what, Leo?" I asked, tilting my head. "You don't even own the car you're driving. I checked the titles this morning. Everything is in my name, including this house." Leo's face twisted into something ugly and unrecognizable. He lunged for my phone, trying to take it by force. He thought I had recorded his confession, and he was right. We struggled in the hallway, the tension turning dark and violent. He pinned me against the wall, his fingers digging into my wrists as he demanded the password to my cloud storage. I looked him in the eyes and didn't blink. I wasn't the helpless woman he married anymore. Just as he raised his voice to scream at me again, the front door swung open. My security team, the men I had hired weeks ago to tail Silas, walked into the foyer. They didn't say a word. They just stood there like stone walls. Leo let go of me instantly, his face turning pale as he realized he was no longer the strongest person in the room. I didn't spend another night under that roof. I packed a small bag and moved into a high-end hotel downtown. The next morning, I sent a special gift basket to Silas's front door. It didn't have wine or crackers inside. It contained a single, heavy shovel that I had painted with bright gold glitter. I tucked a note inside that simply said, "Happy digging." A few hours later, Silas sent me a video. It showed him in our living room, accidentally dropping my favorite porcelain vase and smashing my grandmother's antique mirror. He was like a child throwing a tantrum because he couldn't get his way. He thought he was hurting me, but those were just things. I was playing for his freedom, and he was still playing with furniture. Hit subscribe to see how I let his debt collectors do the dirty work for me. By the end of the week, the gambling debt Silas had been hiding finally exploded. Since I had stopped the subsidies from my company, Silas had no way to pay the dangerous men who were looking for their money. They didn't care about his last name or his fake reputation. They showed up at the house in broad daylight and started hauling away the expensive furniture and the televisions. Silas called me, sobbing into the phone. I could hear the sound of things breaking in the background. They're going to kill me, Faith. Please. Just give them the $500,000. He sounded small and pathetic, like a man who had finally run out of lies. I sat on my hotel balcony, watching the city lights, and felt nothing. I told you, Silas, I said quietly. You'll get exactly what you earned. I waited until the following Tuesday to give Silas a glimmer of hope. I sent him a brief text saying I was ready to settle everything and would meet him at my lawyer's office the next morning. Silas replied instantly with a flurry of heart emojis and apologies, claiming he knew I was a good woman all along. He truly believed he had finally broken me. When I arrived at the office, Silas was already there, sitting in the lobby with a large leather suitcase at his feet. He was dressed in his finest suit, looking like a man who was ready to head straight to the docks for his retirement cruise the moment the papers were signed. He even tried to hug me, but I stepped back and gestured toward the conference room. He walked in with his head held high, flashing a smug grin at Leo, who was waiting inside. Silas thought he was about to collect his prize. The conference room felt like a courtroom. Silas sat at the head of the table, flanked by Leo and their family lawyer, a man who looked like he hadn't slept in days. Silas didn't waste any time. He demanded the $50,000 check for his cruise and the $500,000 to clear his debts with the investors who were currently gutting his house. Let's get this over with, Faith, Silas said, leaning back with his arms crossed. I have a ship to catch, and my son has a marriage to fix. He looked at me as if I were a vending machine that had finally decided to work. I didn't say anything. I looked at my own lawyer, who nodded slowly. I reached into my bag and slid a single, thick blue folder across the polished wood table. Silas reached for it with greedy fingers, expecting to see a check. Silas opened the folder, but his smile vanished when he saw the first page. It wasn't a bank draft. My lawyer cleared his voice and began reading out loud, his voice filling the silent room. He wasn't reading a settlement. He was reading the moral turpitude and financial fraud clause from the prenup I had forced Leo to sign years ago. Silas tried to interrupt, but my lawyer raised a hand. In the event of forgery, attempted theft, or intentional financial deception, he read, the spouse forfeits all rights to even a single cent of communal property, including all business interests and residential equity. Silas's eyes went wide as he realized what he was hearing. The air in the room seemed to vanish. Leo looked at the floor, his face turning a deep, shameful red. They had come for a payout, but they were about to get a verdict. Silas slammed his fist onto the table, making the water glasses rattle. I never signed that, he screamed, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. That document is a lie. My son would never agree to such a thing. He turned to Leo, shaking him by the shoulder, demanding that he call the whole thing a fake. My lawyer just smiled calmly and turned the page to show the notarized signature from 3 years ago. No, Silas. You didn't sign it, my lawyer said quietly. But your son did. He signed it because he was desperate for the startup capital Faith offered him to save his failing career back then. Silas looked at Leo, who finally nodded in silence. Silas had spent years treating me like a fool, but he never realized his own son had traded away the family's future for a quick buck years before I became a target. I pulled out my phone and pressed play on a small speaker. The room was suddenly filled with the recording of Silas calling me a gold digger and laughing about his gambling debts from Chapter 1. Then, I slid a high-resolution photo across the table. It was the Lydia Bennett signature from the loan Leo had tried to trick me into signing. That loan you tried to take out? It is completely void because the person who signed it doesn't exist, I said, looking Silas right in his eyes. And I have already filed a formal complaint for identity theft and attempted fraud. For more satisfying payback, hit subscribe for more revenge stories. Silas looked like he was having a heart attack. He realized that not only was there no money, but I had a paper trail that could lead him straight to a prison cell. Silas sat there with his mouth hanging open, but I wasn't done yet. I leaned forward and dropped a heavy set of keys onto the table. One more thing, Silas, I said, my voice cold as ice. I revealed that through a holding company I started months ago, I had secretly bought the very house Silas was living in. The bank was happy to sell the debt to me. Silas wasn't a homeowner anymore, he was my tenant, and he was 3 months behind on the subsidies I used to pay. You have exactly 1 hour to go back there and pack your things, I told him. The retirement cruise is leaving in 2 days, Silas, but you won't be on it. You'll be looking for a motel that takes cash. Silas looked at the keys, then at me, realizing that I now owned the roof over his head. Leo finally spoke up, his voice cracking with desperation. He fell to his knees beside my chair, trying to grab my hand. He started crying, telling me he only did it because Silas pressured him. He tried to use our intimacy as a weapon, whispering about the life we had built and the love we once shared. He thought he could still charm his way back into my heart. I looked down at him with pure disgust and pulled my hand away. I reached into the blue folder and handed him a single sheet of paper. It wasn't a divorce petition, it was a detailed bill. I had calculated every meal, every designer suit, and every luxury vacation I had paid for in the last 3 years. "This is what you owe my company, Leo," I said. "Consider it your final exit fee. You used me as a bank, so now it's time to pay up." I didn't stop with just the private meeting. As Silas and Leo walked out of the office in a daze, I hit post on a drafted message. I share the full truth on Silas's public Facebook page, the same place where he had tried to shame me. I uploaded the gold digger file I found in his office, showing everyone how he had systematically conned women for decades. I included the audio of him bragging about his debts. The fallout was instant. The extended family members who had supported Silas and called me names started deleting their comments. They turned on him like a pack of wolves to protect their own reputations. Silas's phone started ringing with angry calls from the very people he had tried to impress. For more satisfying payback, hit subscribe for more revenge stories. His fake empire was burning down in real time. An hour later, I drove past the house one last time. It was a pathetic sight. Silas was standing on the sidewalk, clutching his retirement cruise brochure like a lucky charm that had failed him. His expensive leather suitcases were piled up in a messy heap on the grass because the debt collectors had already taken the rest of the furniture. He looked small, old, and completely broken. He was wearing his $5,000 suit, but he had nowhere to go. Just as I slowed down to watch, the sky turned gray and it started to pour rain. The water soaked through his expensive clothes and turned his glossy brochure into a wet, colorful mush. He looked up and saw my car, his face twisting with a rage that no longer had any power over me. He was finally seeing the nothing he claimed I came from. The most satisfying part of the revenge was something Silas didn't see coming. I actually had bought a ticket for that $50,000 around-the-world cruise. But I didn't buy it for Silas, and I certainly didn't buy it for myself. I tracked down Silas's ex-wife, the woman he had cheated on and left penniless over 20 years ago. She had been working 2 jobs just to survive while Silas lived his lie. I met her at a small park and handed her the first-class tickets and a prepaid credit card for her expenses. "This is Silas's entry fee to the rest of his life," I told her. She cried and hugged me, unable to believe her luck. I watched the news later that week and saw the ship sailing away from the harbor. Silas's ex-wife was on the deck, waving goodbye to the life Silas had stolen from her. The audit I launched didn't just stop at the dinner table. When the forensic team dug into the company archives, they found a trail of rot that went deeper than gambling. Silas had been using Leo's access and name to run a massive Ponzi scheme within their social circle. He was taking investments from his own brothers and cousins, promising high returns while using the cash to pay his debts. He had treated the family trust like a personal piggy bank, and Leo had signed every document without reading it. The SEC investigation was triggered the moment I handed over the files. I sat in my office and watched the news as federal agents began questioning the Sterling family. Leo sat on our old sofa, staring at the floor, finally realizing that his loyalty to his father was going to cost him more than just his marriage. He was facing a prison cell right next to Silas. Leo was desperate to save himself, so he tried one final, pathetic move. He called me from a burner phone, crying about a romantic getaway he had planned at a cabin upstate. He claimed he had a folder of evidence that would clear my name and prove Silas was the only villain. He begged me to meet him alone so we could talk sense and fix our lives. It was a clear attempt to kidnap me or force me into signing a retraction of my statement. I didn't get scared. I got prepared. I knew Leo was a coward who couldn't act without a plan, so I checked the GPS tracker I had hidden on his car weeks ago. While he was waiting at the cabin with his lies and his desperation, I was at the precinct with my lawyers, showing the detectives the exact coordinates of a man who was planning a felony. The police didn't wait for him to come home. They pulled Leo over just as he was leaving the cabin, his trunk filled with my personal files and a forged power of attorney. He was arrested on the spot for the forged loan, identity theft, and his role in Silas's Ponzi scheme. The video of his arrest went viral, showing the perfect son sobbing in handcuffs as his designer shirt was ruined by the rain. A few hours later, Silas was caught at a dusty bus station 3 towns away. He was trying to flee to Mexico with a suitcase full of stolen silverware and a fake passport. He looked like a common thief, not the proud patriarch who had called me a gold digger. The family's wealth was officially revealed as a mountain of debt and stolen dreams. Hit subscribe to see their final fall. A month later, I was granted a special request to visit Silas in the holding cell before his sentencing. He looked 20 years older, his skin gray and his expensive suit replaced by an orange jumpsuit that didn't fit. He gripped the bars, his knuckles white, and still tried to spit insults at me through the glass. "You think you're smart, you gold digger," he hissed, his voice trembling. "You destroyed a legacy." I didn't get angry. I just leaned in close to the glass and smiled. I told him that I had spent the morning finalizing the purchase of the very prison block where he would likely be spending his sunset years. "The only gold here, Silas, is the bars on your cell," I said quietly. "I bought those too. I'll make sure you have the retirement you deserve." I walked away without looking back at his screaming face. The divorce was finalized on a bright Tuesday morning. I walked out of the courthouse a completely free woman, keeping 100% of my company, my house, and my dignity. Leo didn't get a single cent. In fact, the judge ordered his remaining assets to be seized to pay back the women Silas had scammed over the years. As I was clearing out the last of Leo's things from the attic, I found a hidden letter he had written to Silas before we even got married. "Don't worry, Dad," it read. "I'll make her love me, then we'll take it all. She's just a bank with a heartbeat." I didn't cry when I read it. I just dropped the letter into the shredder and watched it turn into dust. I realized then that my only mistake was believing in a love that was actually a business plan. A few months after the dust settled, I decided to host a new gala. This time, I didn't let anyone else pick the guest list or the theme. I filled the ballroom with bright sunflowers and soft light. The event was titled Financial Literacy for Women. I invited hundreds of women from all walks of life, including the ones Silas had targeted in his gold digger file. I stood on that same stage where Silas had tried to shame me, but I didn't feel any fear. I was the guest of honor, and the room was filled with people who actually respected me. For the final touch, I wore a custom-made necklace. It wasn't made of diamonds or pearls, it was made of solid gold charms shaped like small shovels. I wanted everyone to see that I had embraced the name Silas gave me. I had dug for the truth, and I had found gold. The fallout for Silas's friends was just as satisfying. After the gala, several of the wealthy men who had played poker with Silas tried to sue me. They claimed that since I was the rich one, I was responsible for the thousands of dollars Silas had borrowed from them during those high-stakes games. They sent their lawyers to my office, acting like they could bully me into paying his debts. I didn't even call my lawyer. I simply sat at my desk and pushed a manila envelope toward them. Inside was a list of their own illegal offshore accounts and tax dodges that I had discovered while going through Silas's private office. "If you want to talk about debts, let's talk about yours to the government," I said. They turned pale, grabbed their briefcases, and disappeared from my life forever. I finally took a week off to clear my head. I moved into a new penthouse overlooking the ocean, far away from the house that held so many lies. One afternoon, as I sat on my balcony, I watched a massive cruise ship sail slowly past the horizon. I pulled a crumpled postcard out of my pocket. It was from Silas's ex-wife, sent from a port in the Mediterranean. "I am having the time of my life, Faith," she wrote. "The food is amazing, and the air smells like freedom. Thank you for paying my entry fee back into the world." I smiled as I felt the warm sea breeze on my face. Silas had spent his whole life trying to get on that ship, but he was currently sitting in a cold cafeteria eating mystery meat. The justice felt as sweet as the salt air. I spent the next year focusing on my own healing. I stopped looking for hidden motives in everyone I met. Eventually, I went on a date with a man named David. He was a high school teacher who spent his weekends volunteering at the local animal shelter. We went to a small, quiet coffee shop on a rainy Sunday. When the bill came, I automatically reached for my purse, my heart bracing for the usual excuse. But David beat me to it. He insisted on paying for the coffee, smiling at me with eyes that didn't have a hint of greed in them. "I've got this, Faith," he said simply. I sat back and felt a strange, wonderful sensation. I realized for the first time in years that I didn't have to be the bank for anyone. I was just a woman on a date. I looked at my reflection in the coffee shop window and saw a woman who was whole again. Silas had called me a gold digger because he was terrified that I would find out his own gold was just spray-painted lead. He tried to use my heart to fill his empty pockets, but he forgot that I was the one who built the empire he wanted to steal. I didn't marry for money. I married for a love I thought was real. But I kept the money because I was the one who worked for it, and I used it to tear down a house of lies. My final monologue to the world is simple. Don't ever let someone make you feel small for what you have achieved. The cruise is gone, Silas. But the gold digger is just getting started. Hit subscribe for more revenge stories.